Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1965's The Greatest Story Ever Told, starring Max von Sydow, Charlton Heston, Martin Landau, and honestly almost every star United artists could get their hands on 60 years ago. Now, this was directed by George Stevens, and it's the sprawling biblical epic that attempts to chronicle the life of Jesus Christ from his birth to his death and subsequent resurrection. Now, regardless of your affiliation, faith, or feelings towards practice religion, none of which I'll be discussing here, there's little doubt that this is a stunning piece of cinema, ambitious in scope, a visual and emotional spectacle. It's not perfect though, it has got ambition to spare, but at times can feel all of its 3 hour and 20-minute runtime. But the scale and craft on screen here carries it through, as does Max von Sydow as one of the great screen portrayals of Jesus. Let's take a look.
What do you know about a man named Jesus from Nazareth?
He's the one.
The one what?
Jesus is gathering to himself the souls of men, as a shepherd gathers in his flock.
Now, at the time of its release, The Greatest Story Ever Told was one of the most expensive films ever made, with a reported budget of over $20 million, which is roughly equivalent to $200 million today. Armed with such a budget, director George Stevens and his cast and crew set out to create an experience that would live up to the title of the project. Now, I think the film has since become a significant part of film history, and certainly has to be in the conversation when discussing epic movies, the Ben-Hurs, the Ten Commandments, etc. It's discussed more probably for its mind-boggling cast these days. Hollywood greats turning up for cameos here and there, and also for its leisurely pacing. Now, we'll talk about those things, but one thing that struck me recently, re-watching The Greatest Story Ever Told, was its cinematography. The film was shot by renowned cinematographer Loyal Griggs, who also shot Shane and the Ten Commandments. And considering it was filmed on location in Utah and Arizona and Nevada, the film presents a pretty vivid and believable vision of ancient Judea. Now, it's helped, of course, by large-scale production design and enormous crowds of extras and all the costuming and makeup that demands. Now, it is funny to think that in hindsight I'll have watched this first on a relatively little TV with its 70mm Technicolor widescreen print, panned and scanned, because like many a historical epic of the era, the film really needs those wide shots and panoramas to emphasise the grandeur of events. The camera rising up over the crowd during the Sermon on the Mount, or the crowd scenes of Jesus cleansing the temple. They really need that screen space. Now, if one of the critiques of the movie is that it often relies too much on this widescreen spectacle and an over-reliance on the grandiose visuals over human struggles, then at least it looks this good. Now, The Greatest Story Ever Told is the biopic of Jesus, if you like. The story taking us from following a star to find a baby in a manger, and takes us on a journey from gathering his disciples, his miracles, his persecution, his execution, and ultimately resurrection. Spoilers for Matthew, Mark, Luke and John. Now, even at this length, this is basically a greatest hits of the life of Jesus, and I'm only assuming the majority of the Western world will be familiar with this. And so that's about as much of a plot synopsis as is required, really. Apparently there's a best-selling book that also goes into far more detail. Now, what we will talk about is the film featuring basically the definition of an all-star ensemble cast. Max von Sydow, of course, in the role of Jesus Christ, bringing his trademark quiet intensity to the role. He has a calmness about him here, delivering lines of the Gospels in a dignified but also quite a subdued manner. I don't know if this is the purpose of the filmmaking, but you don't ever really feel emotionally attached to him as a character. He's basically just this centre point, and all these events and characters orbit around him. Now, of course, in contrast, we have guys like Charlton Heston as John the Baptist, who stands out a bit more. Heston, an actor who always had a larger-than-life screen presence, and is used to dominating any film that he's in. And I know people have suggested that this feels misaligned with the measured tone of the rest of the film. I love it, and I think the film needs him and his theatricality for a bit of a boost of energy. Now, much is made of the mega cast here, and it's great, of course, and makes a great poster, no doubt. But when you have the huge talents of the day, such as Sidney Poitier, Gene Simmons, Telly Savalas, Joseph Ferrer, Angela Lansbury, Richard Conte, John Wayne as a centurion, Claude Rains in his final film, it does show a flex of star power, but there's no getting away from the fact that this is all stunt casting, almost token appearances from big name actors who rarely leave much of an impression. But honestly, go to IMDb or whatever and read the cast list, because I've not mentioned a third of it. Donald Pleasance, Sal Mineo, Roddy McDowall, it's endless. Now, this seems as good a time as any to mention that this movie was beaten to the big biblical telling of the story of Christ by about 4 years, as director Nicholas Ray made King of Kings in 1961. The same story, of course, although running 30 minutes shorter with a slightly less starry cast. Now, I don't mind that film, but I may be in the minority here. I'm not keen on Jeffrey Hunter as Jesus and prefer Max von Sydow here, although if anyone cares to know my favourite screen Jesus, it's definitely Robert Powell in Franco Zeffirelli's 1977 miniseries. Now that has an outrageous cast also. So yeah, it's quite amazing to think that the original cut of The Greatest Story Ever Told ran yet another hour longer at 4 hours and 20 minutes. The script penned by George Stevens and about half a dozen other writers. Like I mentioned, it offers a chronological retelling of the life of Jesus, but it also glosses over intimate relationships and personal struggles, which would probably create a bit more drama or even a bit more emotion. I mean, a great but obvious example of this is the depiction of the crucifixion. It's about as poignant a climax as you can imagine, but there is a lack of emotional build-up here, and so it ends up feeling a bit distant. I know it's a different beast entirely, but if you think of Mel Gibson's 2004 film, The Passion of the Christ, by the time they hoist Jesus up on Golgotha, you're emotionally drained and quite appalled at the punishment that's been dished out to him. Now, obviously, this is a biblical biopic in a fun for all the family kind of way, but despite that, it still suffered at the box office. The big films of that year, by a landslide, were The Sound of Music and Dr. Zhivago. Both movies running either just under or just over the 3 hour mark, incidentally. Now, in all honesty, by the time this arrived in theatres in 1965, the golden age of that historical epic had passed. Both Cleopatra and the aptly named Fall of the Roman Empire hammering huge nails into old Hollywood. Bonnie and Clyde were only a couple of years away here. Now, it's not all doom and gloom, of course. The Greatest Story Ever Told may not have put bums on seats in the cinemas, but via the magic of television, it's been providing Easter Sunday entertainment for the last 60 years. Now, shout out to the great music here, composed by multi-Oscar winning composer Alfred Newman, who also did the music for The 7-Year Itch and South Pacific, and composed the 20th Century Fox fanfare music, which is probably the most famous bit of music in the history of movies. Anyway, The Greatest Story Ever Told is undoubtedly an ambitious work with stunning visuals, a more than impressive cast, and a relatively close adherence to the source material, although Jesus walking on water and a couple of his other miracles occur off-screen here, which is a bit of a shame. It does, I suppose, present a broad portrayal of Christ's life and his teachings. Now, for me, there is an emotional detachment here for sure, and a plethora of undeveloped characters, but I can't help but champion the movie for its technical excellence. Stephen took a huge swing, as he was prone to do. Films like Gunga Din, Giant, A Place in the Sun, Shane, and with a story that was already familiar to billions of people over thousands of years. It committed to a noble but flawed attempt at translating arguably the most significant story in human history to the big screen, and he did it all without CGI and filmed the whole thing in the southwest of the US of A. Go check it out.
Do not weep for me. Weep for yourselves and for your children.